guys, this is Zach from Watches on You, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Omega Trilogy Railmaster. So right away I'd like to let you guys know that this watch was provided by JB Hudson Jewelers for the purposes of this review, and also we're going to be leaving links in the description to both their website and our Amazon store where we have just some cool watch accessories and some watches that we think you guys would enjoy. So now let's take it down to the table and get a closer look at this watch. Okay guys, so let's take a closer look at the Omega Trilogy Railmaster. So this review is going to be done in a little bit different of a fashion than what we normally do, in which we're actually really going to be comparing the Trilogy Railmaster to the now modern Railmaster. So right away you can see that there are some major styling differences, and so the Trilogy Railmaster is really designed to be exactly the same as the vintage. There's really no changes to it. They wanted to basically bring back the vintage Railmaster. Now again, I'm just going to get this right off my chest right away. I really don't like how they gave it a patinaed lume on either of these watches. I think if you're going to remake a heritage watch, you should make it as if it was brand new in the stores at the time, and they did not come with pre-patinaed lume. I can almost guarantee you of that. So they should have put whatever lume they originally had, because I believe that's really what a true heritage piece is. It's a remake or a new model with design elements from the original that's now a vintage piece, and I think in order to successfully do that, you need to take the true elements from that piece, not from that vintage piece today, basically. But so now moving back to the kind of specs of these watches. So right away you can probably tell that the modern Railmaster on the left here is a little bit larger than the Trilogy Railmaster, and I think it actually looks larger than it is because this is a 40mm and this is a 38mm, so it really isn't that much larger, and both of those sizes I really like. So I don't necessarily really understand, because this one to me looks much bigger than this piece, and that maybe is because the polishing kind of makes this watch blend in a little bit more on the bezels there. Well, this watch has a brushed bezel, so it's not going to blend in quite as much. So let's go to the cases here. So as I said before, this is a 40mm and this is a 38mm. Now the cases of these watches, you can tell, are very different from each other. You can see that the Trilogy Railmaster has a much thicker case back and bezel and crystal versus the modern one, which has a larger main case. Now with regards to overall thickness, I believe that they are about the same. They're not really much different there. This one I'd say is a bit thicker, but this one I say will also lie lower in the wrist, just because a lot of the thickness is in that case back and not really the main case, so this will probably look a lot thinner as well on the wrist. So now let's go to the finishing elements on these two pieces. So as you can see, the modern one has a lot more brushed edges than the vintage one, and the entire case really is brushed on the modern one. Now that's really kind of a personal preference thing, whether you like one or the other. So the Railmaster Trilogy on the right, you can see it's got a brushed side main case, and then really every other element on it is polished, including the bezel there, the tops of the lugs. Basically anything you're going to see when you're looking at the watch is polished on this, versus the Railmaster, the modern Railmaster, where it's going to have really brushing everywhere. There isn't really any polishing. You can see it's got brushed bezel, brushed lugs, brushed side of the main case, brushed sides of the bezel. There's really no polishing on this. So that's really up to your personal preference. I'd say overall case design, I would actually prefer the modern design. I think it looks a little beefier. It feels a little higher quality in the hand. That's maybe just because this has such thin lugs, but I do think that this feels, or at least seems to me, to be a little higher quality than this one, but again, that's really personal preference. So now let's move on to the bracelet. So the bracelet, again, as you can see on this modern Railmaster, it's all brush, versus you have a brushed center link on the Trilogy and polished outer links. Now, with bracelet-wise, I will say I do prefer the Trilogy for sure. It seems to fit the form of a wrist nicer. It seems a little more, it's softer. This one has this one has sharper edges, I'd say, when these ones seem really all rounded out, and it's very kind of wavy. It just flows very nicely, versus this one, I'd say it's a little bit more rough. It's about the same quality as basically any other Omega bracelet, but I think that this one really kind of steps it up the notch a bit in the fact that it is a little bit more kind of smooth, I would say, and has less sharp edges. So now let's go to the clasp. So the clasp is something that I don't really think that changed much, or I didn't really know that they changed it a lot, but they have very, very different clasps. You can see that this one has a standard, just fold over clasp with a extremely thick clasp, might I add. I don't really know why they made it that thick. It seems really, really thick for this kind of watch. I mean, if you just look at it, especially considering how thin that bracelet is, I think they would have gone for a little bit more like the modern one. This just seems overly thick to me. But you do get a micro adjust on the Trilogy, which is actually very useful, and I'm glad they included it. You can see it just says push right there. If you push, it goes out, or it goes in, and you just get a few micro adjust places. It doesn't really go necessarily that far out, I'll say. It doesn't give you a huge amount of adjustment, but some is better than none. So now the clasp on the modern. So the modern one has a standard butterfly clasp. You're going to just push down here first, fold it over there, and now you have two buttons to open it. So now just comparing the two closed, the one on the modern Railmaster is much more minimalist, as you can see. Sorry, I'm trying to get a good grip there. You can see that the modern Railmaster really blends in with the bracelet very, very nicely. When this one, I mean, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's just boom right there. You get very kind of nice looking bracelet and giant clasp. I'm not a huge fan of the look of that one right there. But now let's go to the dial and the movement. So the dials of these two watches are quite different. You can see that the Trilogy Railmaster is quite a bit more minimalist, with really no other writing besides 3, 6, 9, 12, Omega, and Railmaster. That's all it really says. When this one it says coaxial, master chronometer there as well. You also get these lines going from 9 to 3, and it just kind of has a little bit more design elements to this. You can definitely see, though, the indices on the indexes on the Trilogy are much smaller than the ones on the modern kind of take on the Railmaster. Now, that's one thing I do like about the Trilogy much more. I think these are quite a bit too large, and again, just staying on the indexes. Come on with the patina loom. Manufacturers, I know people like patina loom color, but I think you really, unless you have a vintage piece, a heritage piece should always come with the original loom what it would have looked like when it was new in store. That's just my personal take. Let me know if you think differently in the comments. But I think manufacturers should really start doing that more and more, especially on like this modern one. I kind of understand the Trilogy. It's totally all vintage, versus this one is just supposed to be a modern take on the Railmaster. I really don't like how they did that patina loom there. Also, since it's so dark, some do patina loom, but not nearly this dark. So the dial, though, is also, I'd say, a little more legible on the Trilogy, just because this one has a kind of brushed metal finish to it versus a matte black, or they actually say it's tropical, but it really looks more gray than a little brown tinged at all, to me at least. So I would say that this one, the Trilogy, is going to be a bit more legible, but the Omega has some more design elements, and it's a little bit cooler because it's got that metal finish there. But I would say I do overall prefer the Trilogy Railmaster's dial. So now going to movement. So with movement, actually, they're really using the exact same movement. They're both using Omega Master coaxial movements, and neither of them have dates. So with regards to movement, you're getting the exact same thing. There's really going to be no functional difference. Both have magnetic resistance up to 15,000 Gauss, which is more than you'll ever encounter on a day-to-day basis. So that's great right there. And so overall, these two pieces, they may kind of seem similar, but there are a lot of differences to them. I would say overall, your best bet, in my opinion, is going to be to go with the modern one. So this one is limited to about 3,500 examples, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. But so it's honestly not even that limited of an edition. I mean, 3,500 watches is not really limited in my mind. I think limited is more 500 and under. So there are still a decent amount of it out there. I will say that this will probably hold its value a little better in the future, although it is pretty soon to tell because the new Railmaster has not been out for very long, so they haven't really shown up on the pre-owned market. And actually same with the Railmaster Trilogy, so it's a little too early to tell which one's going to hold up better in resale value, although I will say that the Trilogy probably will just because it's got that extra limited edition aspect. But that being said, this one is coming in here at JB Hudson Jewelers for a pre-owned price of $6,000, when this is coming in brand new at a price of $5,000. And you can actually get this on a leather strap as well, which lowers the price even further. So I think value purchase, if you just want a great watch every day and you're not necessarily super concerned about resale, I'd say go with the modern one. If you want one where you really want a piece of Omega's history and something a little bit more special, then go with the Trilogy. Either way, I don't think you're going to do too bad, and I think they're both great watches. So once again, I'd like to remind you guys that we're here at JB Hudson Jewelers. They lent us this watch for their review. These are both available here, this one being new, and as they are in Omega authorized AD, and this one they just got in pre-owned. So thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks.